NTV.
Yes, welcome back. This is Morning at NTV and my name is Romeo Busiku. Our next conversation is going to be centering about how best we can protect our cultural tourism sites in Uganda. Earlier this month, Uganda hosted tourism practitioners from across Africa for an exploration on the industry's outlook and prospects at the 2020 Pearl of Africa Tourism Expo. However, despite the enthusiasm on the sector's prospects, much criticism has surfaced as some tourist sites are being closed off. Why? With the data from the Uganda Civil Aviation Authority showing that the country recorded over 32,000 flights in the financial year 2018-2019, wouldn't this be the time to bolster the tourism budget? We are now joined by Sandra Natukunda. She's the Public Relations Officer at Uganda Tourism Board for more on this deliberation. Thank you very much for joining me right here Morning at NTV.
Thank you for having me.
First of all, what is happening to our cultural tourism sites? Are they disintegrating, and how is it affecting tourism as a whole in Uganda?
First of all, I would like to start by saying that the first step to identifying that something is a tourism site is you first profile it. You know, we go through a process of profiling and then you categorize if something falls as a cultural or historical site, a political site, or a general purpose site. So I'm not quite sure of the site that is being identified, but that's the process we're at right now of identifying what is a cultural site and what is not. Yeah. And what I can say now is some kingdoms, like say the Uganda Kingdom, are the ones that have really come out to identify what the cultural sites are. Yeah.
What should be done to protect these cultural sites so that they could be preserved and then at the end of the day ensure that we get the tourists to come in and add on to the economy?
One of the key things really that need to be done is product development, which is a task that falls under the Uganda Tourism Board. And like I noted earlier, right now, the key thing that is being done is identifying what the cultural sites are. Uganda is a very diverse country. We have many kingdoms, a very diverse cultural heritage. So the process that we're going through right now is to ensure that first we identify what a cultural site is. You know, we get many reports, many people call the Uganda Tourism Board and say, you know, there's a rock in my village and identify that as a cultural site, but is it, you know? So the process we're doing right now is profiling the cultural sites. We've already piloted a project with Ankole, which was finalized last year. We're able to identify the various cultural sites in Ankole. What this means is that you identify the site, you profile it, you find out what level of development it's at, and then you're able to identify whether it's something that needs direct government funding, whether it's something that you can open up to development partners or open up to private sector to invest in, so that it reaches the level of development and preservation that then brings in the tourism earning. So that was done with Ankole, like I noted, and now we're going to Karamoja, and our ambition...
let's take to Ankole.
Okay.
What were the dynamics? How many cultural sites did you survey, and what was the assessment? Were they in good to bad condition? Yes.
A number of the sites in Ankole, according to the report that we got, were in a level of there's need for more investment in terms of product development. Some of them are really redundant. Like there's a rich history, there's a rich culture, but nothing is being done around it.
By the communities?
By the community and by the communities and some of the challenges that you find, like some of these historical sites or culture sites are on private land. So it's a bit of something you need to navigate. So we did identify that many of them in Ankole were in that kind of setup. So what we do as the board is you profile it, you identify what level of development it's at, and now the next phase is to identify the level of investment it needs. Is it something that the government can directly invest in, or is it something that we open up to development partners or encourage Ugandan private sector to invest in? So that's the next phase of the project.
Okay, and the area leaders agree to the whole process of rehabilitation?
Yes, definitely, because what this does, direct investment and product development brings earnings to the community and generally the local districts and the area in general and the country on the grand scale.
Development is understood, but some areas you have these people and their very staunch cultures telling you, that is a sacred place, no one is allowed to step in there except the four and grandchildren of the area, but then it's for development. Those are the dynamics in Ankole. What's happening in Karamoja?
So Karamoja, as you know, is a very unique part of the country with a very unique culture as well. And as we continue to position ourselves as a culturally diverse country, Karamoja is one of the areas that take priority. If you've noticed, most of the times we go for the international expos, we present usually the Karamoja outfit and you know, the Buganda. So it's really taking priority. So, but one of the things that haven't done in the past that we're doing is profiling Karamoja. You know, most people know just about the culture, the way of life, but the actual sites in Karamoja that have a real historical story and cultural story that tie around the, you know, the area. So that is what we're trying to focus on right now. And I think this project is going to pilot later this year to profile and know which areas in Karamoja are those that tie to a historical story, a cultural story that we can now then develop to a product that then brings in tourism earnings for the community and the country in general.
Are we talking about Ankole and Karamoja only?
No, we're really going to do this for the whole country. And the ambition is that we should be done by this, at least by the end of our next financial year, which kicks off in July. So the ambition is that by July 2021, we'll have been able to profile the entire country and are able to identify really what is a cultural site, what is a political site, what are the monuments and things like that. So it's just Ankole was first, Karamoja, and then we'll do Busoga, Buganda. We've already started. Good enough. For the Buganda Kingdom, it's very organized in the way it is set up. So most of the sites are already profiled, but there are things that we're working on with the kingdom. Conversation has been initiated on that, and we'll continue to unpack the whole country.
Before UTB's intervention, what were some of the problems affecting these cultural tourism sites?
Of course, the biggest thing, like I noted earlier, was the level of development of the sites. You know, there are some the unique challenges in different sites. Accessibility, if the site is on private land, kingdoms, like you noted earlier when you said, like, and the cultural leaders, like, oh, you can't touch this, you
separate land.
You know, things like that. So those are some of the challenges. But then our job comes in to, first of all, educate the community, to tell them that, you know, when we develop this and gets to this point of development, this is what is in for the kingdom, this is what is in for the community. And people are getting to understand that. Yeah, of course, there's also the issue of accessibility and so forth. But that's being worked on as well. So it's but the most important thing was the level of development of the product, the quality of service that can be offered around the product. Then of course the story around the product, because you know, tourism, a big part of tourism is really the story, the experience, what people feel when they come to a location, the stories they hear. So those are some of the things that we're trying to gathering the information. That's a bit of a challenge, but those are issues that we're now trying to address in this process of profiling the cultural sites and different tourism sites in the country.
After the whole profiling is done, what happens next?
One is well, after the profiling is done, we really just annotate, find out the level of development it's at, then position it for investment. So there are areas that get direct government investment. You know, if it's an issue of accessibility and needs road connectivity, then that's direct government funding through UNRWA. You know, if it's there's some development that can happen through the Uganda Tourism Board. We do have a product development aspect to our mandate, and some of the activities and some of the developments can be done through that. Different fundings come through the Ministry of Tourism, our brothers and sisters at the Uganda Wildlife Authority. So we first identify, one, the need for investment and whether it can come directly from government. Now we do have development partners as well that directly fund tourism projects. The UN, you know, there's certain projects that are funded by development partners. So after you profile, you're able to identify what needs direct government funding and what can go to a private, to development partners. But then there are also sites that can be open to private investment by, especially we're now really encouraging Ugandans to invest more in tourism. So then we're able to identify that this is private and can open it up for the funding for, you know, take up by private sector. Yeah. So the next step is to profile it for investment by clearly identifying which level of investment does come in. Yeah.
In the financial year 2018-2019, this country recorded a total of 32,000 flights incoming tourists.
Yes.
Do you think this is a time we should be talking about bolstering the tourism budget?
Definitely. Yeah, we've if you look just from a couple of years, the tourism budget has increased over the couple of years, and this comes because the government has prioritized the tourism sector. So I think that's one thing we need to give a lot of recognition for. And for us as a sector, it shows that once there is government priority, then the chance for funding does come, whether it is directly to the sector or indirectly, because tourism is really cross-cutting. When you talk about issues of roads, then we don't get that budget directly through the tourism sector, but it comes through the Ministry of Works and so forth. So it's really a good time for tourism, I would say. Yeah.
As Uganda Tourism Board, what are some of the challenges you've experienced during this process of trying to assess these tourism culture sites? What are some of those challenges?
Like we mentioned earlier, you know, some of the sites really tie a lot to, they have an emotional attachment to the communities. So it's quite a process to educate the community, you know, mindset change, which is kind of something that's a bit lengthy to go through, and it makes the process a bit longer. However, it's something that we're trying to navigate around. Then, of course, the resource envelope is always something that we continuously discuss. But
what is the budget now, and what more do you need?
Right now, the budget is really needed to go towards product development. A big chunk of our budget, over 70%, goes to the marketing of the destination. But we've realized now that the marketing is going quite well. As you can see, the tourism arrivals now growing up, at least 10% growth since 2016 to date. So that is going well. However, because of the consumption of the product, there's now need to develop it. So that's where really the money is going, and that's where the cultural sites now come in. How do we develop it? Because our biggest tourism product, besides our wildlife, is the culture. How do we put more money in it to make sure that the communities and the country earn from it? Yeah.
So this is about culture and tourism. Let's talk about those tourism sites that have nothing to do with culture but could be a magnet for those tourists. Are they also being profiled?
Yes, they are. So the profiling happens in a number of ways. When you profile a product, you put it in a category, whether it's culture, whether it's nature-based, whether it's political or historical, because you'll find that there's some products that are really just historical, nothing to do with culture or political, you know, just really about the history of a place and so forth. So the profiling is done in such a way that it's categorized. Yeah. It's put in a category of whether it's a culture site, a historical, political, nature-based, which are the, you know, we are gifted by nature. You've heard that before.
Indeed. Have human-induced activities added to the pressures on these tourism culture sites? Have people themselves destroyed these cultural sites?
In some places, yes. It's unfortunate, but in some places this has happened, yes.
Why? Because it's so important. So I'm thinking, why would a person know that something's so sacred and then go ahead to destroy it or do something that would destroy it?
For the most part, really, like I said, it's quite unfortunate, but for the most part, really, it's the lack of information, which again, it's something that we look to address. You know, the lack of information, people actually really do not know that this is an important site. If when developed, you know, it can lead to higher tourism earnings. It's not something that is really known. The lack of information is a big factor. And second of all, the other issue that we noted is that the involvement of the community in the project. Sometimes we really encourage the communities to be proactive, you know. You will hear about different sites in your area, but then how proactive are you to say, identify the site and report it to the local government or so forth, you know? So the proactivity of the community could really benefit in trying to not get into further destruction of the sites. Yeah.
Besides protecting and preserving culture tourism sites, what more needs to be done to elevate tourism as a whole in Uganda?
The one thing, like you noted earlier in your introduction, that we just concluded the Pearl of Africa Tourism Expo. Yes, in 2020 in February. And one of the things that we were trying to address here was intra-Africa travel. Trying to, there's a huge potential for the African market. But for a long time, the African trade has been positioned to sell to an international buyer, you know. But over the years, the African market has grown economically and otherwise for us to be able to tap into our market. So what the thing that we're trying to address during this, this discussion at the Expo was how can we tap into the African market? And it's evident that there's a lot to do with mindset, you know. So the mindset change, if we could just tweak a bit our mindset on how we view our African market, I think it would change the way we look at tourism and many other economic areas. So for long, we've sold to the international buyer, but there's an African buyer, you know. Research from the World Travel Organization showed that 4 out of 5 African tourists travel within their region. If I were to ask you, or even the next person in this studio, many of them will have traveled to Kenya, to Tanzania, meaning they took money to that area rather than take it to another country. So this is enough statistic to show you that there is a disposable income in Africa that Africa can tap in. And we're hopeful that the Africa, you know, the free trade area will be able to bolster into Africa travel and other economic spheres of Africa. So just to put emphasis, the area of mindset change.
Mindset change. How are you planning to do that?
It's something that will take a lot. It will have a lot to, let me just give an example, for instance.
Go ahead.
The Africa Free Trade Area is already in force from July 2019, last year. And 28 out of the 53 African countries are on board as we speak. Now, this calls for policy change. It calls for, first of all, the policy change, the private sector to embrace it, and then also the government in general, in terms of making sure that the areas agreed upon in the Free Trade Area Agreement are actually followed, right? So this doesn't mean that development will happen overnight, but when policies change that favor us to travel freely in different African markets, if policies change that allow for free air trade, that means the prices of air flights will go down. That means you can enter any African country and get visa on arrival. So when those things begin to happen over a period of time, is when it's not an overnight success, definitely, because, you know, African countries are different level of economic and political, you know, levels. But over a period of time, when these policies are enforced, when these markets are opened, we'll definitely see that change, and this will translate directly into the tourism.
Which might take a lot of time, because you did talk about the mindset change. I was here thinking, mindset change, is it the people in Africa who are actually biased of traveling in the areas? But then the way you mentioned it seems like it's the leaders in their respective countries who are actually adamant to expedite the FTA to allow free movement of people. So the mindset is on the part of the leaders themselves.
You see, the mindset is on the people who also may be or may not be leaders. They also may be the constituents of the different countries, because we've come from a colonial. We can't forget the story of Africa. We've come from a colonial mindset, like I told you earlier. A big part of any company that exists literally produces products for an international consumer. And we've not done that for Africa, right? So for us to actually go back to the point where we retrack and understand, first of all, the African consumer and what they need and what's good, it will take some time, and we have to appreciate that. That means some laws have to change. Like I mentioned,
removal of borders.
Yes, it's quite the process, and we need to, while we want it so bad, we also need to appreciate where we've come from and what it will take to actually get where we want to be. But the important thing is this has started, right? It has started, and we're really positive about the outcome.
Have you gotten any resistance from these other African countries within which you would like to travel freely?
I wouldn't really call it resistance, but I would like to say that you know, African countries are at different levels politically, economically. Some countries are francophone, anglophone, meaning they are different levels of, you know, different, what do they call it? Different governance styles, I would say. So I wouldn't say resistance, but it's a process to learn how to maneuver the process.
So the politics has affected somehow the whole intra-Africa tourism travel process and the project as it is?
We wouldn't say the politics, but we're just it's a process of appreciating that we are at different levels politically and economically as different African countries.
Okay, besides intra-Africa tourism travel, what are some of the other mechanisms UTB has expedited domestically to actually promote domestic tourism in Uganda, especially Uganda?
Yeah, so a key thing, by the way, priority for the Uganda Tourism Board is to promote domestic tourism.
Indeed, how?
Yeah, while we recognize that Africa is a prime market for tourism, Uganda also is a prime market for tourism. And the first step we're going to, like I noted earlier, is to profile the products and put them in a space that is consumable by Ugandans. But as we're doing that, because that is long term, what can we do now? The biggest, one of our research that we did, I think it was in 2017, 2018, did reveal a general lack of knowledge, awareness. And that's what we're trying to address at the moment. Yeah, we've had a Tulamble campaign that has been spearheaded by our Minister of Tourism, our State Minister, Honorable Chiwanda, and now it's being revamped to be more inclusive in terms of get more hotels on board, identify a season in the Ugandan calendar where we can have Ugandans traveling at discounted rates.
Within the country?
Within the country. So it's we're refining the campaign in a way that it actually is all inclusive and it's put on a calendar in the calendar year for Ugandans to know, oh, by the way, from this time to this time, I can save for this and I can do this, and it's something that we're trying to address, and I think within the next few months you will be able to highlight that further.
Why is domestic tourism not taking off in the first place?
It is taking off, actually. If you look at where we've been, because if you look at where we've been over the last few years and where we are now, it actually is taking off. If you look at the park entrance for Uganda's national parks, just during the peak season, the Christmas season, over 60% of these are Ugandan nationals, Over 60% of these are Ugandan nationals. So it's that alone, the numbers don't lie. They show that Ugandans are year on embracing consuming their own tourism products. So I think that would be the first indicator. Yes.
Some of these tourist sites are being charged for you to access them.
Yes.
Could there be, some experts have been contending that, could there be some kind of mechanism where it's free for the locals so that to improve and promote domestic tourism in that regard? Does the UTB have the capacity to actually make this a free venture for Ugandans so that they can enjoy their country? Some people might want to travel and see these tourism sites, but the problem might be the money, transportation, and then going there, the fee to pay and enter, accommodation and all that. Yes.
Anything good in life comes at a cost. We must recognize, everything good in life comes at a cost, and these sites need to be developed. They need to be, the people that work there, they need to be paid. It's an effect. So to make it free, maybe a bit of a stretch, but to subsidize for the Ugandan customer, that is definitely something that has been done. If you go to literally any tourist site in the country, the Ugandan national pays less than the East African, than the international. Yeah. So to say free, that may be a bit of a stretch, because again, we're trying to develop the products and make them, at a level of good consumption. So, but to subsidize is definitely something that's being done.
Indeed.
Yes,
Sandra Natakunda, the PR or Uganda Tourism Board, many thanks for having made the time to speak to us. You've been very, very important in helping us expedite and actually put this whole issue in perspective. People did not know a whole lot about the cultural tourism sites that might be living in their midst or next to their doorstep, but then now they're in the know. Thank you very much. The show is Morning at NTV. We are going to take a very short bumper, and I'm going to come back with messages from your loved ones with regards to those celebrating their birthdays this particular Tuesday. Very good morning once again. This is Morning at NTV.